DWI reform is an area of special legislative concern for our next guest, Chair of the Judiciary and Public Safety Committee, DFL Senator Ron Latz. Senator, welcome to Senate Spotlight.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Senator, as chair of the Public Safety and Judiciary Committee, you hear from law enforcement agencies all the time. What are they telling you about impaired driving in Minnesota, and how big of an issue is it?
Well, it's an issue anytime there's anyone driving drunk on our roads. The arrests have actually been going down in absolute numbers and in comparison to the overall population in the last several decades. So the state is making great progress toward reducing the incidence of DWI on our roads. That said, it's still out there. And the single biggest determinant to the number of DWI arrests besides the occurrences is enforcement. It's having sufficient officers on the roads to recognize the signs of an impaired driver and to initiate the arrest.
Senator, I know this is an issue that's close to you because earlier this year, people were hurt, some died, and your community as a whole was impacted when an impaired driver drove into a restaurant's patio. And since then, you've created a DWI reform package, more or less. So talk me through that process, what it was like for you, from working through the crash's aftermath to the legislation and where it stands now.
Sure. Well, the crash occurred in a place I used to hang out at a lot, the Park Tavern in St. Louis Park. I lived across the street from there for about 10 years. Great pizza, by the way. And there were people out enjoying the pizza, the drinks, the beautiful summer afternoon when a drunk driver drove through the patio, killed two of our valued community members, one of them a waitstaff, a second-generation waitstaff at Park Tavern, and one of them employee over at Methodist Hospital in St. Louis Park, and injured 9 others. And it turned out that this person had about 4 times the legal limit, actually, it's a .32, and had a long history over about 30 years of repeat DWIs. So a person who had met all the requirements for reinstatement of valid driving privileges, had gone through 6 years of rehabilitation and documented abstention, but at some point fell off the wagon. And this is what happened. So the question came up, what can you do about it, right? I've been working in this space since I prosecuted driver's license revocations at the Attorney General's office arising out of DWIs, and that was 35 years ago. And there is no magic bullet. There's no single answer. But one of the most significant responses that we've implemented is the use of the ignition interlock device. And that's where I turn to as a way to try to be more preventive, to get more people on interlock, especially when they've got long track records like this person did. So that was my first response, was let's find a way to require someone under his circumstances to have been on interlock. If he had been, presumably, he wouldn't have been able to start the car.
That's right. Keep those people from kind of going through the system, finding a way to stop them. That's great. Thank you, Senator. What kind of reception has this work you've been doing received from your colleagues here in the Senate or from your wider community?
Well, pretty positive. We haven't received much pushback. A little bit of hesitation with regard to some of the lower level offenders and requiring them to go through the interlock program when they get into a repeat offense situation, and for how long. It's an expensive program, so there's been some hesitation there. But by and large, people are looking to find solutions here. And we've come up with 2 or 3 key focuses. One is to extend the duration of the interlock when it's required, and that ramps up depending on the number of priors that they have in our proposal. To extend the look-back period for requiring the interlock. In other words, when was the prior that triggers the requirement to install and use only a vehicle with interlock. And we went in this proposal from 10 years to 20 years. And then the third main component is to reduce the cost of getting the license reinstated with the interlock. And there's a very substantial reinstatement fee at the Department of Public Safety. Now totals almost $700. We have a proposal that would spread that out, not require all of it paid up front, which becomes a real financial barrier to people who want to be on interlock, but don't have the resources to meet that hurdle right away.
Senator, do you think this reform package goes far enough, or is it just a really good starting place to build upon?
I think, well, first of all, we want to see how it works before we do anything more. Over the years, we've done a lot of DWI reforms in Minnesota. Used to be it was a 0.12 alcohol concentration threshold, then we dropped it to 0.10, then to 0.08. We've had longer license revocation periods. We've added forfeitures to repeat offenders. We added a gross misdemeanor for double the legal limit, which is now 0.16. So, and then we added the interlock initially. And the studies across the country have shown, and I carried the pilot project for the interlock program in Minnesota, the studies have shown that it's a very effective way to prevent repeat DWIs. When people are on it, they're required to drive only that vehicle. When the penalty is substantial for driving a different vehicle or for tampering with the interlock device itself, they can't start the vehicle. It's got a rolling retest, so while you're driving, you still have to stay sober. You can't just start it and then have an open bottle and start drinking. You've got to use the device at least daily in order to maintain the requirements of the program. So it helps maintain sobriety in and out of the vehicle. It's even got a camera on the device to make sure the person who's supposed to be on it is the one who's using it.
Yeah, that sounds very thorough and very wraparound. Senator, another bill you have out, which is Senate File 1719, looks to reform another part of our public safety system. It would create a task force on mandatory minimum sentences. Why do you think that a task force like that is necessary?
Well, we haven't had a really comprehensive look at mandatory minimum sentences in Minnesota that I'm aware of at all. And mandatory minimum sentences are one-size-fit-all sentences that judges are supposed to follow. And I say that because some mandatories actually have off-ramps if certain criteria are met, and other mandatories have no off-ramps. They're hard and fast mandatories. But they don't always work in terms of justice in any particular case. They also have substantial costs involved as well in terms of prison costs, workhouse time, people away from families. So it's worth taking a good look at it to see if it really works. It's also a system in the statute that bypasses the sentencing guidelines, which itself has a range of default sentences when you get into certain categories of serious offenses and criminal history, and then mitigating and aggravating factors that can get you out of that. That system is supposed to set up some consistency across the state. Mandatory minimums cuts through that and leave judges and prosecutors and defendants with little wiggle room to really meet the circumstances of the case. So we want to take a look at that, set up a task force that's a broad-based task force. Give us some feedback so we can have some evidence, make some better informed decisions about the long-term future.
Senator, with the budget targets that have come out, your committee is being fully funded. In fact, getting some unexpected bonuses, shall we say. So it seems like a lot of your priorities will be able to come through. So what else would you like to see happen in the judiciary and public safety sphere?
I wouldn't characterize it as unexpected bonuses. Our budget is about 95% people. They're the correctional officers in the state prisons. They're the crime lab personnel and the scientists at the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension. We don't have lots of places that we can cut without directly cutting critical services for the safety of the public, for the safety of our correctional officers. So we don't have much to even meet sort of the requested operational increases for our agencies. But we didn't get a cash cut in that sense. But that also means we don't have enough in our budget, right now anyway, to fund crime victim services the way we'd like to fund some of the crime prevention initiatives that are so important to get ahead of the curve and prevent crime. And there are other initiatives like emergency radios under the Armor system that right now we don't have the funds in the budget And some of those radios allow jurisdictions and allow agencies like firefighters and EMTs and police to all be able to talk to each other across agencies when they're all responding to an emergency. Those radios right now are getting obsolete. They're end of life. They need to be replaced. So we're trying to find a way right now to fix that problem, but we don't have a flush budget. We're pretty tight.
Senator, any final thoughts you'd like to say?
Well, we're working hard here. We take input from our constituents, from the stakeholders everywhere, from the sheriffs and the chief of police to the defense attorneys and from victim advocacy groups. We get input from a lot of places, and we welcome that input. And we're going to put together the best budget we can, given the circumstances that we're facing.
Senator, thank you for your time.
My pleasure.